Hi everyone, it's Miss Landis here. Today we are completing day 14 of the contingency plan. Today's lesson begins with 10-2, multiply a fraction by a whole number. We are breaking 10-2 apart into 3 days, so today we just have to complete the solve and share, the look back, and then page 551, numbers 1 through 3. So let's get started. Our I can statement is I can use drawings, area models, or number lines to multiply fractions by whole numbers. How much tomato juice is needed for a group of 4 people if each person gets 1/3 cup of juice? How much tomato juice is needed if they each get 2/3 cup of juice? So there's 4 people here, and we have to think that each person in both questions, there's 2 questions we have to answer. In both situations, each person is getting the same amount of juice. So since something is repeated 4 times, we can multiply in order to get our answer. So one way that you could set this up before you solve the equation would be to maybe organize an area for you to show your work, because you have to answer 2 questions. There's how much tomato juice is needed if each person gets 1/3 cup of juice. So maybe we can have a section, each person gets 1/3, and a section for each person getting 2/3. And you know I like to have an organized space to show my work because it helps me organize the information that's in a word problem. So you can do it this way too. That way you know I have 2 questions that I have to answer. I need, 2 different equations here. So at this point you could pause the video and try to solve your own equation, and then you can press play again when you're ready for me to go over the answer. Okay, so if each person gets 1/3 cup of juice, there are 4 people, so that would be 4 times 1/3. So my equation, 4 times 1/3. So in order to solve 4 times 1/3, you take the whole number, which is 4, and you multiply it by the numerator of the fraction, which is 1. So 4 times 1 is 4 over our denominator of 3. And since our numerator is greater than the denominator, I know that I can make that a mixed number, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So to make that a mixed number, 4/3 equals, well, what would be 1 whole? Our denominator is a 3, so in order for me to have 1 whole, I have to have a 3 up top. Plus, what would be left over to get to 4? Well, 3 plus 1 is 4, so I have 1/3 left over. Now remember, the way that we were doing it in class would be to circle your 1 whole. Then you know that that's 1, and 1 plus 1/3 would be 1 1/3. I'm just going to circle that so I know that's my answer. So if each person gets 1/3 cups of juice, we would need 1 1/3 cups of tomato juice altogether. So now let's say each person is getting 2/3 cup of juice. So now I have to multiply the whole number of 4 times 2/3. I take my whole number of 2 and I multiply it by the numerator. I'm sorry. My whole number is 4 times the numerator, which is 2. 4 times 2 is 8 over my denominator of 3. Same thing here, our numerator is greater than the denominator, so we have to make that a mixed number. So 8 thirds equals, so let's find how many 3's are in 8. And I know it's been a while since we did this in class, but one thing that we were doing was skip counting as well. So another strategy that you could use would be to skip count by 3's, 3, 6, 9. Once you go over 8, then you know that you can't make another whole. So 3 thirds plus, well, 3, 6 would be our next number if I added 3 more, which is not at 8 yet. So I can have another 3 thirds to make a whole. 3 plus 3 is 6, plus 2 more gives us 8. Equals, let's circle the holes that we can make, 1, 2, with 2 thirds left over. Now, it would be ideal to write a sentence to answer this question, but if you organize it this way, then the work is pretty much organized enough for the answer to be understood. If each person is getting 1/3 cup of juice, we would need 1 1/3 cup altogether. If each person is getting 2/3 cup of juice, we would need 2 and 2/3 cups altogether. So let's look down here at our look back. How is multiplying 4 times 2/3 cup of juice related to multiplying 8 times 1/3 cup of juice? We solved this equation up here, and we know that the answer was 2 and 2/3. So they're asking, how is this equation here related to this equation here? So let's solve 8 times 1/3 first. 8 times 1/3 equals whole number of 8 times 1 is 8 over our denominator of 3. Now that's looking familiar because we saw it up here. So we already know that 8 thirds is equal to 2 and 2/3. Now I'm thinking of why we got the same answer. Think about your first step. Our first step in 4 times 2/3 was to multiply the whole number times the numerator. 4 times 2 is 8. Our first step in this equation is multiplying the whole number times the numerator. 8 times 1 is 8. So our multiplication facts are coming up both as 8. 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 1 is 8. So that would be how they're related. So we can say the equations are related because four times 2 is 8. And 8 times 1 equals 8. Both have the numerator of 3, right? 8 times 1/3 and 4 times 2/3. So since both have the numerator of 3, we're going to end up getting the same answer of 2 and 2/3. So you can pause the video here and finish copying that. I'm going to move on to explaining our lesson. So our essential question is, how can you find the product of a fraction multiplied by a whole number? Remember that the word product means the answer to a multiplication equation. So we're doing exactly what we did in the solve and share. We're going to multiply a whole number by a fraction. So here's our example problem. Dory lives 1/4 mile from school. If she walks to and from school each day, how far does Dory walk during a school week? And we discussed this problem in class. We actually did watch the video for this. We actually did this lesson in class, so this should sound a little bit familiar. When we talked about it in class, we broke down the table, and we were like, okay, Dory is walking to school on Monday. She also is going to be walking home. So since she's walking to school and home from school, she's going to be walking that 1/4 2 times each day. So she's going to walk on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. She's going to walk 1/4 2 times. Overall, during the week, she's going to walk that 1/4 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. And 1/4 times 10 is the same thing as writing 10 times 1/4. The commutative property says that we can switch the order when we multiply, and we're still going to get the same answer. So that is the equation that we'll be solving. And then I'm going to show you how they break it down here. So one way would be to draw a picture to show the distance that she walks. So this would be like a bar diagram. You could add the 1/4 10 times and you'll get 10/4, but you could also multiply. Now, one thing I don't like is they don't show you how they made 10/4 into a mixed number, but we'll be going over that when we do the guided practice. In the another way, Dory draws a number line. They draw a number line to show you the distance that Dory walks. And remember, like when we're counting on a number line, we get bigger and bigger. So here we're counting by 1/4 all the way up to our stopping point right here of 10/4. Now here's the equation. We have 10 times our 1/4. And this is something here that we weren't doing in class, but you could do it this way. And it's kind of like an extra step, really, which is why we didn't do it in class. But you could write what you're multiplying by, the whole number times the numerator on top of the denominator. So we're doing 10 times 1 over 4, which equals 10/4. Then you have to write 10/4 as a mixed number. So they don't show that step, but I'm going to break it down over here in the Convince Me because we're not doing the Convince Me today. I'm going to show you how to break apart 10/4 into a mixed number. So first, look at the denominator. The denominator is a 4, so in order to get one whole, I need 4/4. The same number on top and bottom. Same numerator and denominator. Our goal here is to have the left side and the right side equal the same because we're breaking apart the 10/4. So right now 4/4 is not equal to 10/4. I can have another 4/4 because 4 plus 4 is 8. Can I have another 4/4? Well, 4 plus 4 is 8, and 8 plus 4 is 12, and that's more than 10. So what would give you 10 here? What would be left over? These two equal 8. 2 more gives us 10, so we have 2/4 left over. Now we can make our mixed number. That's 1 whole, that's 2 wholes, and there's 2/4 left over. Bonus points if you know what 2/4 is equal to, because we could also write this a different way. We could say 2/4 is equal to half, so you could also write that it equals 2 1/2, because 2/4 and 1/2 are equivalent fractions. Okay, so let's practice. We have 3 problems to do. All right, draw a picture to explain why 3 times 2/5 equals 6 times 1/5. This is just like the look back where we compared 4 times 2 equals 8 and 8 times 1 equals 8. So look at the numerators. 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 times 1 is 6. So I think that in order to solve this, we can look at another example, because we can draw a picture that kind of looks like this. So another example says calculate 4 times 3/5 to determine how far Jess bikes to and from work in 4 days. So 4 times 3/5 we see right here. So here's 4 times 3/5. That's right here in the bar diagram. 1, 2, 3, 4 times 3/5. Right here they have 12 times 1/5 equals 4 times 3/5. Now that 12 times 1/5 is right here in the bar diagram. So I like the way that they drew this bar diagram to show that these two equations are equal. So we'll do something that's the same down here. So first let's do the 6 times 1/5. So what you're going to need to do is draw your bar. And you have to break it apart into 6 equal sections. So first I'm going to cut mine in half. And then I know I need 3 on this side and 3 on this side. Now what do you think is going to go inside of each of these sections? We're starting off with the 6 times 1/5. I have 6 sections, so I'm going to put 1/5 in each section. Now I need to have 3 times 2/5. 3 times 2/5. So I'm going to draw a second bar underneath. How many sections do I need to have? For 6 times 1/5, we had 6 sections. For 3 times 2/5, we need to have 3 sections. Use your top bar to line it up, because if I broke this apart into thirds, the lines would match up here and here to give us 1, 2, 3 sections. And now it really helps you see that 2/5 is going to go in the box because the 2/5 are matching up. So 2/5, 2/5, 2/5. So what the picture is representing is that solving these equations is going to give you the same answer. And then they don't ask us to actually solve the equations, they really just ask us to draw a picture. So we'll just stop there as long as you have your picture drawn, then number 1 is answered. For number 2 and 3, write and solve a multiplication equation. So you have to look at the pictures here. Lesson 10.2 is about using models. So models can be bar diagrams, they can be number lines, they can be pictures. It's just a visual representation of an equation. So for number 2, I see 2 pie tins, and each pie tin has 2 pieces in it. When you're figuring out what the fraction is, you have to look at what 1 whole is, because that would be your way to figure out the denominator. So to know what our fraction is going to be for each of these, we have to count the parts. So if this pie, if the whole thing was there, how many pieces would be there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, how many pieces are left over? 2. That means that the fraction is 2/6. And this pie is also showing 2/6. So what is repeated? The 2/6, because we see it twice. So since we see it twice, that's 2 times. So our equation is 2/6 times 2. Numerator times the whole number. 2 times 2 is 4 over our denominator of 6. We do not have to make this a mixed number because the numerator is smaller than the denominator, so we don't have a 1 whole there. We can't make it a mixed number. For number 3, you have to look at what is being repeated. So when we're thinking about multiplication, we think about repeated addition. We think about equal groups. What is the equal group and how many times is it being repeated? So one thing that I see being repeated over and over is this arrow. It's moving 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And each time it moves, it's moving the same distance on the number line. So what is the distance that it's moving on the number line? I'm tracing the jump, and the first jump stops at 2/3. Each time it's moving 1, 2 sections out of 1 whole, which would be 3/3. So we see the arrow moving 4 times altogether. 4 times that jump of 2/3 equals 2 2/3. So for day 14, that's all we have. If you feel like you need a little bit more practice, we have 2 more days of this. So that is all for the video today. Tomorrow we'll be back for day 15 and do a little bit more practicing with this. For now, have an awesome day, and I'll see you guys later.